This is episode 74, a behind-the-scenes coaching call with a first-time marathoner. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm Jason Fitzgerald, the head coach of Strength Running and your host. I do want to start today by thanking some of you for a bunch of new reviews and ratings for the podcast in Apple Music, which I think is the new name for iTunes, but I don't know. I'd have to ask the kids what they're calling it these days. Anyway, in particular, one review said that this podcast is for you if you want to up your game and improve your training. I'm very grateful for that because that's exactly the goal of this podcast and more broadly, strength running. I want to give you the tools, the techniques, the knowledge, the mindsets, workouts, and training principles to take your running to the next level. So thank you for that podcast review, and if you haven't left one yet, I would greatly appreciate it. Today's episode is different than most of our other episodes because this is actually a coaching call. I'm going to be speaking with Pam, a runner who's never run longer than about 9 miles, but wants to run a marathon. And at age 46, she's not sure where she should start or even if a marathon is a realistic goal for her at this point. So we're going to walk through her background as a runner, her training statistics, like, her experience with speed work and high mileage and long run distances, any upcoming races she might have, and my guidance for how she can gradually turn herself into a marathoner. Before we dive into this behind-the-scenes coaching call, I want to thank our sponsor, QuickTape, a thin peel-and-stick foot tape that helps you manage foot and lower leg injuries. If you have plantar fasciitis, shin splints, or other foot pain, QuickTape is a safe, easy option to help you run with less pain. Check them out at quicktapeusa.com and be sure to use code SRPOD20 to get 20% off your first order. All right, let's hear from Pam and start our coaching call on how she can become a marathoner. All right, so thank you so much for doing this. I'm always encouraged when runners want to come and talk to me for an hour about their running. So thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, no problem. No, thank you. I was like, I've been coached my whole life. So, it's very much, I see a benefit in any bit of information I can get. So I'm always like, sure, I'll do that.
Well, this should be exciting because I want to take you from someone who's, from what I understand, has never run a half marathon to someone who has a plan for running their first marathon.
Yes, I would definitely say now that I'm getting a little bit older, especially after that last 5K that did not go well, I can see the benefit in instead of just pounding yourself out for, a short period of time to get settled in and, really enjoy your run and for a longer period of time.
Right. And when it comes to running the marathon, getting ready to even do the training necessary for racing 26.2 miles, it is important to kind of take that long-term perspective and kind of enjoy that process and that journey. So that's what we're going to talk about, that whole process of getting you marathon ready. We're going to talk about some things that you've struggled with in the past, some of your upcoming goals, and how you can basically best set yourself up to achieve your goal of running a marathon. So I kind of want to divide this conversation up into a couple different sections. I want to talk about your background. I want to talk about some of your training habits, and then we can talk about some of your upcoming goals.
Okay.
All right. So, my whole hope here is that we can pinpoint specific areas for improvement, whether that's, workouts you're doing, mileage, long runs that you're covering, pacing, recovery. I want to talk about a lot of different things so that you have a really coherent plan for improvement for your next race, and then a good way of thinking about preparing for your next marathon. So let's see what you're trying to do. That's exactly what you're trying to do, right? Run your first marathon. Do you have a timeline in mind for when you'd like to do this?
No, I would say that my goal is to do so when I am ready without putting a real humongous time frame on it, because then I tend to push too hard and get myself into trouble. So I always put forth as much, max effort as I can, but I don't want to set I'm going to do this next year. Absolutely on September, such and such, because if I do hit a snag, I'm more likely to be like, oh, we're not going to take that rest we need to because we're on a plan and let's just struggle through and push through and probably then never achieve the goal. I don't know if that's good I sound?
No, I think it is. And particularly when you're going from where you are right now to where you want to be, which is marathon ready. That's a big jump. And we're going to talk about where your training is right now. And when you are making that big jump, it's not in your best interest to do so on a shortened time frame. That's when you make training mistakes. That's when you rush your training, your long run progressions, your mileage, and that's when injuries happen. So we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that you're training intelligently and safely so that you stay healthy this whole time. Now, you
Right.
did say
I want to
something.
enjoy the run. I don't want to be out there for 6 hours, just dying, but hey, I did it. I'd like to, do well at it. Or so, yes, absolutely.
Yes, and doing well at it is more fun than struggling through 26 miles of suffering. That's not fun for anyone. Now, you said something really interesting when we were emailing back and forth setting up this conversation. You said that, I'm not even sure at my age if this is something that I should do. So maybe we can start there. How old are you, Pam?
I am 46 as of just a few days ago. So,
Well, happy
sure.
belated birthday.
Why, thank you.
And I think you're a spring chicken. You absolutely can get ready for your first marathon. I've helped people in their 60s run their first marathon. So let's just kind of dispel with that right off the bat. You're absolutely a candidate for running a marathon, particularly because you're already a runner. You've already been training and running races. You just haven't really been running any longer races. So let's talk more about that. What does your running kind of look like on a weekly basis on average? Are you running how many miles a week? What's your long run looking like these days?
My long run, I'd say I have up to about 7 miles, and I've been doing that on a bridle trail that I found near our house. So it's a little bit more technical. I actually fell walking down the dumb thing. So let me just say that if your choice is gravel or slightly damp, wet dirt, I'd say the dirt's probably the better choice, not the gravel. So, but anyways, so I've been doing my long run on a trail, and that's about, like I said, about 7 miles right now. And previous to that, I wouldn't have even comprehended even running that long. So, that far, probably because I was slower, and to do 7 miles would take way too long in my thought pattern. So now that I've gotten faster, and I guess that more the goal is to get faster, so that's where I'm lost in here. Like when I read that you said that on a 5K your long run should be, what were you saying, like 10 to 12 miles, I was like, oh, to run a 5K, and I'm like, well, I guess that makes sense aerobically. So
Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to think about this. There's kind of, the general principle in running is that more is better when it comes to mileage and performance. With that said, higher mileage is an additional injury risk.
exactly. That's where I would come up to, right? Well, yes, because I was an ice skater, a competitive ice skater throughout my younger days. So you jump up in the air and you slam down on your right leg with all of that force over and over and over again. So I have always found probably like an IT band issue where the outside of my right knee would hurt going down to my ankle. And yes, I know that anytime something hurts, I'm like, you got to strengthen it. Anytime somebody's like, oh, my something hurts, I'm like, that means you need to do something about it. You don't need, you need to strengthen the area. But what I didn't know until listening to you, or didn't think about, is the fact that just because my knee and possibly my ankle hurts, that's not where the problem lies. It was in my hip, because as soon as I started your IT band stuff, all that magically went away. So yes, that has been an impediment to me putting on more mileage, along with the fact that I started running with our German Shepherd. So he, now 8 years old, is not, like 3-4 miles and he's about done. So that used to be what we did. And now I've learned to take him out for a couple miles, bring him back to the house, and go back out on my own.
Well, that certainly works. And, you're discovering that, the strength training is so critical for staying healthy as a runner is a very good one. And I'm glad you're learning now before you go and embark on marathon training, just because, the more you run, the more important that strength training is. It's really kind of the armor that gives your body the strength it needs to deal with all the impact forces of every single foot strike that you take. And the faster you get, the more of those higher impact forces there are with every single foot strike. So So it looks like you're starting to run a little bit more. You've gotten your long run up to 7 miles. What's been your weekly mileage like and your longest run ever?
Okay, longest run ever would probably be the 7, truthfully. And then no, I'm take that back. I did 8.5 by Niagara Falls. It's amazing when you have pretty scenery and what have you. You can just go along, and it doesn't seem as long. And weekly mileage, well, then I'll do like 3. I was only taking 2 rest days. And the rest of the days I was running between 3 and 5 miles, and then the one long run. So what is that, 30 something?
Yeah, probably in the high 20s, give or take, depending on, what your long run might have been for that week. That's good. I mean, that's what I would consider you have a pretty decent base of mileage. You just haven't really gotten your long run up to, a higher level. So there's a lot of room for improvement there. So have you been doing a lot of racing as well? Do you race, 5K, 10K distances?
This is my 3rd season of doing the 5Ks. I have a 10K planned for Thanksgiving Day. I was going to do one last year, and we ended up having out of town guests. And my husband was like, "You're going to be gone for what?" I'm like, "What, an hour instead of a half an hour? Seriously?" But okay, so I'll do the 5K instead of the 10K. And I usually would do one in June, September, November, and December. So I don't know if that was too much, because I did feel this past June, I think I told you I totally killed a 5K, at least for my age group, and then gave myself only a couple of days of rest and hopped back into it and was like, all right, I can actually succeed at this. I'm gonna really start doing it, and took myself down to 1 rest day a week, and oh my gosh, did I crash. It was bad. It was bad, Jason.
Well, let's hopefully design your training so that doesn't happen again. I mean, in general, the shorter the race, the more frequently you can do it. As you can imagine, you can't do a marathon every week, but you could do a month of racing a 5K every weekend, and that's not really problematic. And the other thing too is the more mileage that you're doing. So, if you're running 20 miles a week or 30 miles a week, that's going to essentially give you some protection over training. In other words, adding a lot of intensity to your training. Now, if you're running, say, 40 or 50 miles a week, that's going to give you even more protection. Assuming that it's 40 and 50 miles of, easy running, which most of it should be, it kind of is the counterbalance to all the intensity.
Yes, that's where I was going wrong, because I was doing, I think I told you too, I was running the 6 flights of stairs in our parking garage like 8 times. I was finding every hill I could. I was doing sprints. I was definitely more on the side of very high intensity, shorter period of time, and not trying to do the long run, because I didn't think that had anything to do with 5Ks. So yes, I was definitely way, way up there on the intensity.
Yeah, so I think we might have found the culprit for you, really starting to feel fatigued, earlier this year. The fact that you were doing a lot of intensity without a big focus on a lot of easy running. So, that balance was a little bit off, and that probably was why that, you had to kind of take some time off and really kind of get back to neutral. So let's talk about these races. What's your best 5K time thus far?
27:03.
27:03. That is pretty good.
It's okay. That one had a lot of hills. But before that, I had not been doing that. Like I said, I think because of all the hill training I did, that was where I shone. It was, I can take a lot of torture for a short period of time. So yes, get up the darn hill, just suffer, get up the hill. And then I also found, like, telling myself, now use the downhill, use your muscles, like actually good, don't just be like, oh my gosh, I made it and walk down the hill. Use the downhill in my favor. So I think I did really well at that type of race. The other previous ones had been completely flat, and I just didn't seem to be able to do well. That's when I'd sit at like 28, 30, 29-ish on those.
Okay. Well, about 27 minutes for 5K, that tells me that, you're capable of running, mid 8-minute pace or so for 3.1 miles, which is pretty great. That kind of tells me that, you have some of the raw skills necessary to do well at the longer distances. So we can, we can start making a plan for how you would, tackle a half marathon and then potentially a marathon. So
That would be awesome. I would say I'm only 5'2" as well, and my all the height is definitely in my torso and not my legs. So it's funny how I'm probably not exactly built for doing super fast either, just because.
I'm only a 5'7" guy, and my legs aren't that long either. But I've known quite a few very short runners, both men and women, who are very, very good. So don't worry about the length of your legs. Let's just make sure you can move them really fast.
That, I actually also got fitted for shoes and they did a gait analysis. And the guy who watched me, he's like, actually, he goes, you're incredibly efficient. He's like, you don't lift your legs up real high. He called that something. I don't remember what it's called. He's like, you do not. He's like, but it's incredibly efficient. And I do sit at like 177 to 180 on the stride count, which I know you said is not that important to worry about. But
Yeah, I mean, that's your cadence. So how many steps you take per minute. And, if you're running your easy pace under 10 minutes a mile, and, I'd say you're probably somewhere around 10 minutes a mile, when you go out for an easy run, that's pretty much where you should be, if not even a little bit on the high end, which is just fine. So I think your cadence is good. You probably are a more efficient runner. So that's another encouraging sign for you moving up to the longer distances. In other words, if you had a lot of inefficiencies, if your mechanics, had inefficient movement patterns to them that are simply just going to make you a much better candidate for a running injury when you start running longer long runs and increasing your mileage. So that is a good sign. Now, let's talk about how you might prepare for some of these 5Ks that you've run in the past. Do you kind of put a training plan together? What's your normal approach?
again, probably backwards in nature. Like I would start off really easy and then start adding more sprints, longer sprints, harder sprints, adding some fartleks to my long run, like just upping the intensity up until the day. I'd say only recently did I learn about maybe backing off that last week and tapering down. So that worked, again, that worked well for June that I did. So, but before that, like I said, probably slightly backwards, putting all of the hard effort in at the end. Is that correct?
Well, training should be periodized, which in other words is kind of, how you go from the beginning of a season to the end of the season, how you go from less intensity to more intensity. And generally speaking, periodization does have more intensity in the final weeks, or final 1 or 2 months of a training season. So that general approach is good. Probably what could be improved is the progression of individual workouts and long runs and mileage. So, the general idea of, easing in the beginning of the season, harder and faster, more intense in the later weeks of that season is great. That's exactly how you should do it. But, of course, the devil's in the details and how we kind of go from, let's say we're going to start with an easy fartlek and then we're going to end with, a very challenging, say, track workout that is going to mimic the demands of a 5K. There's a lot of steps that you take in between to make sure that A, you're ready for that workout, that hard track workout, and B, that you're going to be able to do it and do it well so that you get the physical benefits of that workout and also the confidence, just the confidence of doing it and executing it and doing it well, so that when you line up on race day, you think to yourself, I did that really hard workout on the track that was very similar to a 5K, maybe it was 3 times a mile at goal 5K pace. Then I'm confident that I can really achieve my goal today.
Yes, I felt like, oh, I can do this. And I probably started off way too fast. I started at the beginning of the pack. And I think, I went out way too fast. And maybe that's also why I just could not settle in and catch my breath. I don't know if that's a thing. Like if you just go, gangbusters at the beginning, can you just never get yourself back together? Or if it was the heat or.
A friend of mine likes to use the line, a race can't be won in the first minute, but it can be lost. So if you do start too fast, you kind of dig yourself into a hole that you're never going to get out of. As you can imagine, let's say you're trying to run a marathon at 9-minute mile pace and your first mile is your first 2 miles are done in 16 minutes. Well, you've really just damaged your muscles and eaten through a lot of fuel and, worked through a lot of energy that you really didn't have. And that's going to come back to bite you later in the race. So you can certainly go out too fast. That's a classic mistake. I'd say it's more important to go out conservatively in longer races. So say for the marathon or even a half marathon. But, when it comes to a 5K, your first mile can be fairly aggressive. Particularly if you're trying to go for a personal best. I like to see more aggressive pacing strategies the shorter the race, because you're not dealing with low fuel stores. You are just dealing with the rising acidosis in your muscles. Your muscles are just becoming acidic. That's what's slowing you down, later in that 5K. And hopefully the fitness that you've gained over the season, all the workouts that you've done have given you the tools to overcome that and finish strong. So that's, really the goal of all those periodized race-specific workouts that we do throughout the season.
Okay, now when you talk about a season, do you mean a calendar year season, or do you mean like, okay, I finished a 5K, now I'm gonna slow down again to the next? Do you mean in between races, or do you mean calendar year?
So I kind of mean something a little different. I kind of mean like a 3, 4, maybe 5 month block of time that has a specific goal. So when I say season, a lot of the times that means your training plan. So, you always start backwards. You start with your goal race, and you work backwards from there. Okay, I want to run this 10K on Thanksgiving, and I'm going to schedule some tune-up races before that 10K. But the couple months beforehand are all geared toward that one race. Now, of course, you want to do well in your tune-up races, but the ultimate goal of that season is the goal race.
Okay, so pick one, use the others as a tool to get you to doing really well on that last one, instead of trying to PR, each single one. That's just not, how should I say, doable. Or
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly possible, but as you can imagine, let's say, if you have 4 or 5K races and you're only doing them once a month, then it's going to be hard for you to periodize your training. And, if that's September through December, your fitness changes and evolves and ebbs and flows throughout the months and weeks, and you're not going to be in top form September 1st and December 1st. It doesn't really work like that. You kind of have to go through a cyclical nature of training where it goes easy, moderate, hard, recovery. Easy, moderate, hard, recovery. And that's kind of a general flow of a training cycle or a season or a training plan.
excellent. Our strength training group, and following those plans, I take it if you were, like you said, recovery. Okay, if you recovered, then can you jump right into yours, like those plans running? Like I know on Saturday, okay, I'm supposed to do 8 miles. If I had not done anything for, let's say, the winter and was starting up in spring, is that something you just jump into, or should you be doing before you even start your training plan?
Well, so when I say recovery, I kind of mean like the time that's immediately after a goal race. So let's say it is, ultimately we're going to talk about how you can run a marathon. So let's say it's your marathon. You run a marathon. What do you do the next week? Well, you probably shouldn't really run much, if at all. So that's really your week of recovery. I like to see runners take 1, 2, or 3 really easy weeks where you're just kind of getting back into the swing of things. You're not really running any structured workouts, but you're very gradually getting back to a quote normal workload. Once, kind of like a month after the marathon, you've had some time off, you've had a couple easy weeks. Now you can actually jump into a training plan. You can jump into, a well-structured, periodized training program, assuming that training plan, has some easy weeks at the beginning, which of course it should, because those early weeks are really a base training type of phase of training. So, that's kind of how to think about recovery. Obviously, you're going to need less recovery after a 5K. Maybe you take a week off, particularly if you've been training hard for this 5K for, say, 3, 4, 5 months. take that week off, really let your body recover and, heal any kind of issues that you've been dealing with throughout the season. Then you can have, a week easy and then jump into a plan. But it's always good to, cycle through training cycles like this. You mentioned taking the winter off.
Yes, I was going to say I don't want to do that. So I'm glad to hear that that's not really what you're talking about. So
unless there's like a really big issue going on, I really don't think runners need more than about 2 weeks off ever. If you have a big injury and you need to take time off, that's fair. If you have a legitimate case of overtraining syndrome, yes, you might need more than 2 weeks. But, even if you've just run an ultra marathon, you've run 100 miles in a day, you can still take 1 or 2 weeks off and then begin running easy. Because look, running is a long-term cumulative sport. What you do today impacts what you're able to do next week, and next week impacts next month. So when you take significant periods of time off from running completely, then, you're just kind of setting yourself back months and months at a time. So we want to avoid that.
Yeah, the shepherd is like, oh, it's winter, feels like 12, let's go, 5 miles, 10 miles, let's go. In the winter, or I'm sorry, in the summer, I can barely get him to go a mile. He's too hot. But so, yes, he loves winter running. So I'm very happy to hear that I wouldn't have to take off gigantic chunks of time.
Great. Yeah. And you have a nice little running partner who can help you get out the door. That's perfect when it's freezing outside. I need that.
I know. I'm always like staying out there. I'm like, can we go? Can you stop sniffing every bush and let's just move so that I can stop freezing?
Let's now come up with a plan for you to run your first marathon. So here's a couple things that I'm encouraged by. I'm encouraged that you're really eager and interested in this goal. Obviously, if you're doing it because you feel like you have to, then you're not going to be as passionate about it. The fact that you are running actually pretty decent weekly mileage, but without a significant long run, that means that you're running very frequently and you're running, 4 or 5 miles at a time. And you're doing that, almost every day a week, 5, maybe 6 days a week. That's great. You might actually want to reduce the number of days that you run and increase the distance of some of your individual runs so that you can work on running longer without working on running more. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. I was like, oh, this is very encouraging, refreshing. When I did pull up one of your training plans and see that there are 3 rest days a week, I was like, oh, I was overdoing it. Yes, I can see that now. So yes, you do, like you said, work hard on your hard days, have your easy days be actually easy. So I have been adding lifting to the fast day and my long run day, and then just completely taking it easy on those other days instead of trying to lift and do whatever on on one of the off days.
Yes, that is perfect. What you're doing is polarizing your training. You're making your easy days really, really easy, and you're making your hard days even harder. And so that's really prompting the body to get fitter and adapt to more stress on those days. And then, in your recovery days, you're really just recovering. You are letting your body adapt to all the hard work that you did the day before. So yes, that is a great strategy and approach. So those are a couple of things that I'm encouraged by. One of the things that I didn't ask you about was your experience with running injuries. Do you have a significant injury history, or are you able to run without any major issues?
I wouldn't call it an injury. Like I said, well, I did end up going to like an orthopedist once for like the ankle foot pain. It was like arch pain. I was disappointed. I was expecting like exercises, like this is what you should do to strengthen it. And instead she like taped it up and said, don't walk on it for 3 days. And I went home and took that off and said, forget that. And yes. And then also struggled with what to do about it. I didn't quite know. I knew that something needed to be fixed, but I didn't quite know. That has plagued me until I found you. So maybe 6 months ago, I would get to, that's another thing that stopped me with the higher mileage. I would start as soon as I'd increase the mileage, these little nagging aches and pains would come back. I wouldn't say that it was an injury per se. It was just something that would bother me. But that has been really, really good for like 6-8 months. So I'd say I probably have that licked, knock on something.
Yeah, knock on wood, but that is very encouraging, particularly going, 6-8 months without this injury or annoyance, however you want to classify it as, has come back and you haven't really experienced it for a while. So that's great. I think this is yet another good, encouraging sign. You're not someone who's getting injured every 6 weeks, every 8 weeks with a different Achilles problem or IT band syndrome or foot issue. So that is great. I think that you could definitely run a marathon next year. So let's kind of talk about how we can do this. And of course, this is, if you wanted to go with this schedule. Of course, there's a lot of different ways that we could do this, but we're recording this the very end of September. You are gearing up for a 5K on Thanksgiving. Did I remember that correctly?
No, I was going to do the 10 on Thanksgiving, and then the week of Christmas. I love doing this race because we're up here in cold Ohio, and it's usually snowing, and it's just so peaceful, and I love it so much. But they only offer a 5K on that day, so it's usually like my last race of the season, and then we just go to whenever the German Shepherd wants to run until spring again.
Gotcha. Okay, so this might actually be a nice little schedule for you. You could spend the fall season, September through December, focusing on the 5K, while at the same time working on, maybe getting your long run up to 9 or 10 miles. Do it very gradually, maybe increase it by a mile every 2 or 3 weeks. You can take a recovery or down week with your long run distance every, maybe 4, 5, 6 weeks or as needed. I think we can be a little bit more flexible with a cutback long run in this particular scenario. The secondary strategy for doing that is, of course, we're training for a 5K. You're going to run a 10K on Thanksgiving, but we're also thinking long term. I want you to try and race a half marathon in the spring. Because if you can run a 10K, then you are ready to start training for a half marathon. So, this season is kind of your preparation for half marathon season, which I would say is, the winter into the spring. And if you were able to do that, then, the next step is running a marathon. And then you could potentially schedule a marathon for the fall season of 2019. Because, getting your long run up to 9, potentially 10 miles this fall, then for the half marathon, you're going to get your long run up to 12, 13, maybe 14 miles so that you're adequately prepared for the distance. And, again, you can run it well as opposed to just trying to finish and make it through the distance. Now that you're comfortable running double-digit long runs, now you're ready for a marathon training cycle. Now, depending on how the timing works out, you could go back to the 5K in early summer or late spring and try to run another really fast time. Again, take some time away from running super long distances, but still maintain a decent long run. That will ensure that you're ready to start marathon training sometime in mid to late summer for a fall marathon. And, you can pull up any training plan for the marathon in the Team Strength Running members area and see where the long run begins. Depending on the complexity and difficulty of the plan, it's usually somewhere in the 10 to maybe 15 mile range. So you just need to ensure that you're physically ready to start a training plan with a double-digit long run. And coming off of a half marathon training cycle for the spring season, I have no doubt in my mind that you would be able to do that and have a very successful marathon training cycle. I mean, this is kind of like thinking, how do I get ready for a marathon over the course of an entire year? And this is how we would do it. What do you think?
It sounds great. So my one question is I noticed so right now I'm doing the advanced 5K plan. Should I stop doing that for right now and do something different? Or should I stick with that? And then also I noticed I'm on week 1. Okay, so on Saturday I'm supposed to do 8 miles. Should I not push myself to do that? Should I dial back the long runs and just kind of do my own pace with those? Or should I just say, screw it and jump in?
Screw it and see what happens. Well, I think you could do a little bit of both. So let's look at the workouts, so the faster training sessions, and the overall weekly mileage of that training plan that you're considering. And do any of the workouts or any of the weekly mileage totals just scare you? Like, are they just, in your mind, way too hard, or the mileage is too high and challenging for you?
I would say that No, in that because it builds gradually. If I can, do okay on the 8 on Saturday, so, maybe try it, see where I get and see how I feel. And if I can do that, then no, obviously you can gradually work up to more. So no, nothing really scares me. I just don't want to do, what do you call it, too fast, too soon, too the three twos. I don't want to set myself up for failure. How about that?
Yeah, that's always a good idea. And with the first long run being 8 miles, the last long run is probably, 12 or 13. Am I right with that assumption?
Yes, I think so. I remember seeing like 12 on like maybe a couple of weeks before the end of the plan.
Right. So in this case, what I would do is, that might be a little bit too aggressive. I might just use the plan as is, with the exception that just do a shorter, I'm sorry, not a shorter, but an easier long run progression. So maybe you start at 7 miles, because that's a little bit more comfortable for you, and you progress very gradually throughout the plan. So if it's a 16-week plan, maybe you take 2 recovery weeks where you run a shorter long run. Then that kind of leaves 6, 8, really 10, I think, or 12 weeks of building your long run. And if you start at 7, you can get up to maybe 10 or 11 if you're taking appropriate cutback long runs and you're not increasing the distance every week, which you shouldn't. It should go maybe every 2 weeks, or if you're feeling a little bit more sore or tired, you can even run the same distance for 3 weeks in a row before going up another mile. So I would just be a little bit more conservative with the progression of long run distances. But, like we talked about before, you have experience running fast workouts, intense workouts. You have experience running decent weekly mileage numbers. So I wouldn't cut back any of those metrics, but you should be a little bit more conservative with the long run, I think, because that's going to be a big jump from your longest run ever to 12 miles in a single season.
Okay. Yes, I agree. I agree completely. Yes, the shorter, harder, more intense ones are easy for me, but yes, those long runs tend to be a little bit more exhausting. I feel great that day, and then the next day I'm like, oh, that was maybe not so good.
Yeah, those short, easy runs, even the longer, easy runs, a long run should be at a relatively easy pace.
That's also what I was going to ask you is, should I be at like just completely easy, or should you push it a tad?
So when it comes to a long run, most of your long runs should be at an easy effort. The same easy pace that you use for a typical base building run, any easy run, that's the pace range that should be used. Same with your long run. Now, with that said, the long run can often be used as a type of workout. It's a little bit more advanced. I might have you, get comfortable with the distance first before adding any kind of faster running to it. But doing things like a progression at the end of a long run is a nice way to add some intensity. So you might get a little bit faster over the final 10, 15, 20 minutes of that long run, finishing it maybe around tempo or 10K pace. You might do a fartlek over the final miles of a long run. I think when it comes to the 5K, you get a little bit more bang for your buck with faster workouts that aren't long runs. Things like the half marathon, the marathon, those are races that are much more like a long run. And so when you start running faster during a long run, that makes those workouts much more like the actual race that you're training for, a half or a marathon. So I do think faster long runs, however you do that, those are more beneficial for the longer race distances. Now, of course, that's not to say, you're not going to benefit from doing a fartlek in the later miles of a long run when you're training for a 5K. I just don't think it's necessary all the time, or even a majority of the time. So if you wanted to do that, what I might have you do is, those recovery weeks in your training plan where you might have a shorter long run, where it, cuts down to 6, 7, 8 miles from 9, 10, or 11, then that might be the time to either throw in a short fartlek workout at the end or do a fast finish long run. But for the most part, I think you should just be running easy, which for you, I would say is, maybe somewhere between 10 and 11 minutes per mile based on your, 27-minute 5K. And that's kind of how you should think about your long runs.
Excellent. Yes, I agree. That makes sense.
And of course, you can always just kind of look at the training plan and see which long runs have some faster running included. I know some do, and they typically are during those recovery weeks.
Okay. That makes sense.
And then, the next step is kind of looking forward to the spring, maybe April, maybe May, kind of depending on how much time you want to train. But, you could choose a half marathon. My recommendation would not be choosing a, grueling, hilly, very hard type of course since it's your first half marathon. And then work backwards from there. You might want to work backwards 16, 18 weeks and start a plan, whatever date that might be. And then you're off to the races.
Okay. I see yes. And then start the marathon training. Okay.
You would train through the winter and spring for the half. Then you would, again, take 7-10 days or so afterwards off, take a couple weeks easy. Then you can, maybe have some training time for another 5K or a 10K maybe. And then, late summer, you can choose a marathon plan. But what I really like about, the way that we've thought about you running your first marathon is, we're not going to dive right in because you could run a marathon next spring. I don't think you're going to do as well. I don't think that you would have as much fun. And I think it would be riskier for you because you're really in a matter of, like 9 months trying to go from I'm a 6-7 mile kind of long run runner to I need to be running 18, 19, 20 miles as a long run just to be able to get ready for a 26-mile race. And that's when we've kind of shortened the time frame for accomplishing this goal. And that's when we start making mistakes. That's when it starts getting risky. And I would rather you be a little bit more patient, run this race in the fall of next year, but do so faster and healthier with fewer injuries. And hopefully this is hard, but with a smile on your face as you cross that finish line.
Right. And be able to and want to do it again. I agree. I could completely do one in the spring. And yeah, that would probably be it, to be like, oh, I did it. That's the end of that. I'm never doing that again. Whereas if you enjoy it and have some success at it, you'll want to do it again. And that could be something that I would want to do long term, as opposed to just a one-time goal of surviving, as opposed to succeeding.
Right, exactly. And succeeding at a race, doing it well, being proud of your performance, that's when you get really excited about running. That's when you want to keep going. It becomes addictive. You love the process of training. You just want to do it over and over again and see how good you can get. And that's the exciting part about running that I absolutely love, but it does require a little bit of patience.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, nobody wants to just keep, doing the same thing miserably over and over and over again. So yes, I've always had that thought pattern of be patient and, as long as you're following a plan, doing what you should be, it'll work out. Eventually you'll do it.
Well, that is a great mindset to have as a distance runner. It is a mindset of success.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jason.
Well, Pam, thank you. We kind of planned your entire year of running in a very short period of time. So
I'm very excited about that. I mean, a plan is what has been so daunting to me, is just thinking of like, well, where I'm at to run almost 30 miles would take me all day. I don't want to run all day. There is no way. But then having listened to you and looking at some of the training plans, it was like, no, you can, you can do it. You can do it in a reasonable amount of time, which would make it enjoyable. So I'm very pleased to have a plan.
Yeah, and one of the big reasons why I wanted to talk with you and do this for the podcast is to kind of show runners who have never even run a half marathon how they might think about taking a big audacious goal like running your first marathon and breaking it down into, daily goals. My daily goal right now is to run 3 miles super easy. And then you start thinking about weekly goals, monthly goals. And soon you're thinking in terms of seasons. So you have your 5K season, you have your half marathon season, then you have your marathon season. And you've gradually made that big goal smaller and smaller, and you're chunking it down into more approachable and manageable sub goals. And that's really how you accomplish some of these crazy things that, runners tend to do, whether it's running your first marathon or 100-mile ultra marathon. You have to think long term like that. And when you can do that, you're a lot more successful and it's a lot more fun.
Absolutely. My coworkers here are like, oh my gosh, Pam, you ran 5 miles. I could never do that. And one day I looked at one of them and I said, yes, you can. I said, because eight years ago when we got the puppy, got the German Shepherd, what did I do? I walked for 5 minutes and I jogged for 30 seconds and did it over and over. And before I knew it, it was like, okay, well, now we walk for 4 and we run for a minute. And it took me this long to get to this point. So yeah, you don't start doing this overnight, but is most certainly doable. And it's so motivating to see the changes in yourself. So, absolutely. It's been a great process.
If running has taught me anything, it's that big goals can be achieved with a patient and strategic outlook. And that skill, I think, has come and it's come with me throughout my life. And no matter what issue I might be dealing with or problem I'm facing, I'm able to use that mentality that I learned from running to help me in life. And that is one of the reasons why I love running so much. I think it is a sport that helps you in so many other areas of your life, particularly when, you're going out and trying to do these big, hairy, audacious goals like running a marathon. When you can do that, when you can mentally grapple with those huge goals, that does rub off on your personal life, on your professional life, your family life. And I think you're just a better person for it. So Pam, I'm excited that you're embarking on this journey of running a hell of a lot more than what you have ever run before. I want you to have fun with it. And, as we're wrapping up, I just want to make sure that, all your questions are answered. You have a good plan in front of you, kind of a big picture plan. But what else about your running are you concerned with right now? Do you have any struggles that you're going through? What other questions can I help you with today?
Let me think. Would you keep doing the hills and the stairs and that kind of thing? Should I keep that kind of, what you want to call it? What did you call it?
Workouts?
Like the intensity. That's it. I'm sorry. Should I keep the intensity up on some of these? Because I noticed looking at the plans, like, yeah, you've got like the strides or the tempo runs and so on. Can I play with those and keep doing my hills and my stairs, or is that not helping me long term?
Yeah, I wouldn't do stairs. I don't think stairs are very specific to running. There's just better ways of gaining strength and, aerobic strength than running stairs. I think there's a lot of impact in stairs. Hill workouts are probably more effective than stair workouts. Obviously because you're actually running up the hills rather than kind of running up a flight of stairs, which you never really experience that in a race. It's just kind of a different way of moving. But when you kind of have this idea of adding more intensity to a training plan, I'm very hesitant to that because I think, Pam, a lot of your benefits and your areas of improvement are on the other side of the spectrum. You're going to get a lot better by running more and getting your long run up because you've already had a lot of experience with intensity. So my first inclination is to say, let's skip the extra stuff that you're inclined to add to the training plan, because I think that the other things in it, the more structured workout, the way that those workouts progress and build on each other, that's kind of the secret sauce. It's really the structure of the training. And, when you start adding a lot of things to it, then they don't progress well or they don't mesh well with the existing workouts. So my advice is to kind of keep the plan as is. And, if you want to run some extra strides, instead of 4, if you want to do 6 or maybe even 8, then I think that's fine. Again, that is an opportunity for you to run fast more frequently without really even adding any more additional intensity to your training. Because strides, they're very fast, but, they're not a maximum effort, 100% speed kind of a sprint. They're more like a 95% controlled sprint, and you get a full recovery. You don't have to do these with short rest. You get a full recovery, and you let your heart rate come down. They're not challenging. It's almost like a drill that you do after an easy run. So that is a way for you to add a little bit extra to your plan without any of the risk of running stairs or more frequent workouts.
Okay. Or for instance, on my long run, the trail run, the very beginning of it has 3 significant hills. So I would walk up the hill at the beginning to kind of as almost like a warm up, and then do my run. The rest of the trail is it's simple, or there's no hills or that kind of thing. And then I come back down and make myself run those hills at least 3 to 4 times at the end. Is that something? Is that just too much too?
I think you can run those hills as long as you're running them, at an appropriate pace. So, if you have a 4 or 5 mile run on your training plan, that's supposed to be at an easy effort. You can still run a hilly course for that short run, but you shouldn't run those hills hard as a type of hill workout. They should still be at an easy effort. Obviously, you're going to run a little bit slower on the uphill, maybe a little bit faster on the downhill, but in general, the effort of the whole run should be fairly easy.
Easy, regardless of what you're doing. Okay, that
Correct.
makes sense. All right. Well, thank you so much for all your help.
Oh, my pleasure. This was really fun for me because I love just, kind of connecting a little bit more deeply with my runners and hearing more about what you're doing with your running right now, where you want to go with your running, and how I can help you get there. So this was really fun. I hope you got some value out of this, and now you know what to do.
Such incredible things, and they seem to be so way ahead of me. And I was like, I don't even know if I belong on this group because I'm not remotely near where any of anybody else is. But maybe a lot of people are, and I'm just the only one talking, out there talking about it.
Well, like I always like to say, we don't care how fast you are. We just want you to be passionate about getting faster and improving. As long as you want to become a better runner, Team Strength Running is for you.
Fantastic. Definitely.
And there we have it. That was my discussion with Pam on how she can approach the marathon over the next year. And there are a couple of ideas I want you to take from this episode. First, there are no shortcuts. There are no magic workouts, secrets, or hidden strategies that's going to allow you to run further or longer. There's only hard work. And Pam is going to have to work quite hard to make her marathon dreams a reality. Second, always be training. Whether that's for a 5K, a half, a marathon, or simply a preseason base building phase of training, whatever you're doing, make sure it's progressing toward one of your goals. And finally, recognize that exciting goals take time. Pam could probably run a marathon in 5 to 7 months, but I don't think that approach is ideal. It's too risky and would likely give her an unpleasant first marathon experience since she wouldn't be as prepared as she could be. Now, in reality, it's going to take Pam about a year to put together the training necessary to run a successful marathon. I hope you're able to absorb these principles and apply them to your own running. Lastly, before you leave today, I do want to talk a little bit more about our sponsor, QuickTape. I know many of you are struggling with stubborn injuries like plantar fasciitis, for example. QuickTape is a foot support strap that can help you run without pain or with less pain. They do this by supporting the arch with a single piece of medical-grade athletic tape that you can apply in less than a minute. And it helps with proper foot alignment and can provide relief when you're just getting back into running after an injury, particularly with foot and lower leg injuries. And the cool thing is that QuickTape doesn't stretch, which means it's not going to stretch out and reduce the support that you're getting. It's also virtually foolproof. There's no cutting, there's no stretching or layering of the tape. You can wear it with or without shoes, in the shower even, and each tape lasts for up to 7 days. As a podcast listener, you can get 20% off your first order with code SRPOD20. Just visit quicktapeusa.com and enter the code SRPOD20 to claim your savings. All right, runners, until next time, run strong.